Why, hello there. So in this video, we just had the creator's voice interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki for the Duskbloods drop. I haven't looked through these interviews yet, and I thought I would record myself and we would go through it together and just see what's going on with the Duskbloods, because I'm very curious about what this game actually is. We've speculated a bit about it. I released a video with my initial impressions, but now let's get some more information from the man himself, From Software's president and the director for the Duskbloods, Hidetaka Miyazaki. This is going to be me going through these interviews, reading through. It looks like it's in 3 parts, and it's just me reacting and giving my thoughts as we look through this. I'll probably do some minimal editing, cut out some of the, chaff, and also just get some of what looks like some new images up bigger on the screen than just what I have here. But yeah, let's just get into it. I just wanted to see what this game is all about because I'm curious, and I think like a lot of us just like a little unsure because this, there's a lot going on here. This is definitely something new for From Software. Part 1, Blood by Dusk. Introduction. We know who Hidetaka Miyazaki is, works at From Software, president. I discussed that. Alright, so first off, tell us what led to this title being developed for Nintendo Switch 2. So a while back, we had the opportunity to meet with Nintendo to discuss ideas, and they presented this. It was a very bare bones presentation, he says. It's just more of a concept than anything else. But they kicked it off originally for the original Nintendo Switch, but the scope of the game made it so that they wanted to move it to the Switch 2 with the stronger hardware. Yeah, the new hardware's focus on online features allowed us to stay true to the original vision, which, hopefully, I know that's one of the big worries that I have, I think a lot of us have, is From Software not the strongest when it comes to multiplayer. And, it's cool for them to work on these things through titles like Night Rain with co-op, and then they're doing more of a PvPvE thing here with the Duskbloods. So hopefully that works well, but pairing someone who's maybe trying to get better at it with the Switch 2, with Nintendo also trying to get better at doing online, hopefully that works out. But I think until it's in our hands, we won't really know how that connectivity, really works out. That's one of my big sort of, just if the game doesn't run well, it won't be fun no matter how good it is. So we'll see. We can't really answer that in an interview though. So now they're asking, game differs from your previous titles. Can you give a little more detail? Structure we already knew is a PvEVE title. I've said that pretty good. That's a lot of P's all and V's all at once. Yeah, so it's at its core an online multiplayer focused game with both player versus player and player versus enemy gameplay. Yeah. Did you always have a desire to make PvPvE games? And Miyazaki says he's always found that structure very interesting, and we've mentioned in a previous video that he's mentioned Escape from Tarkov before, which is an extraction shooter that is PvPvE. And he says it allows for a broad range of game design ideas while also letting them leverage their experience in designing challenging enemies. So sort of, it's not strictly PvP, it's not strictly PvE, so, they get to explore something new while also falling back on what we know they're good at. Okay, and now, this is, as a side note, please allow me to address one thing. As previously mentioned, this is an online multiplayer title at its core, but this doesn't mean that we as a company have decided to shift to more multiplayer-focused direction with titles going forward. I mean, we knew that, but that is good to just hear that they know they've been doing a lot of multiplayer, which isn't their typical. I know some people are excited about it, but a lot of people, I think a lot of people come for the single-player content, obviously. So just this shift, it's just nice to hear that they recognize it as well. Nintendo Switch 2 version of Elden Ring, which I talked about in my previous video. They're going to continue to develop that stuff, so yeah. Please tell us about the game's characters and setting. Game's protagonists or characters controlled by the player are known as Bloodsworn. The Bloodsworn are a group whose members have achieved superhuman abilities, we already knew that, through the power of special blood. As a general concept, they're similar to vampires, but they're not portrayed as horrifying monsters you might associate with traditional vampirism. We tried to extract the sort of romantic aspects we found interesting from concepts such as vampires and blood and reinterpreted them as the Bloodsworn. So Miyazaki is doing Twilight now. He's making it romantic, and vampires. Perfect. In the Duskbloods, the Bloodsworn are competing for something known as First Blood. As human society reaches an end, always an intriguing idea, First Blood flows, an event known as the Twilight of Humanity. The Bloodsworn are summoned to the Twilight of Humanity across a variety of different times and places in a bid to obtain First Blood. Due to this, there is no fixed era or location in which the Duskbloods takes place. There were more traditional Gothic or Victorian-style maps, as well as those depicting the closing years of the early modern period, like the one glimpsed in the trailer, with the train running through it. Okay, that explains, because we saw in the trailer this sort of mishmash, and I've been wondering, and people have been discussing, just, you have these different styles, and how does that all come together? Because you have Jetpack Man, and you have dinosaurs, and all this, and that sort of seems like the glue that makes that make sense. Like, these will be different maps during different eras. That's cool. That's an interesting idea. And I also want to get back into this first paragraph here, because there's some interesting hooks. So sort of what we described, First Blood flows, an event known as the Twilight of Humanity. The Bloodsworn are summoned to the Twilight of Humanity across a variety of different times and places. That gives sort of like Lordran vibes to it, sort of a way of describing people from different periods being in the same place, because in Dark Souls 1, it's discussed how like people can be 100 years different in the timeline, but in Lordran, time is kind of flattened and they'll appear with each other because time is just falling apart. And that sounds sort of like, like the convergence, like Dark Souls 3. It sort of seems like a bit of what we're getting here, just taken probably, I assume, through different maps. And that's sort of an interesting conceit for why there would be different maps and times and places, so I'm into that. That's interesting. Can you let us know the meaning behind the title, The Duskbloods? The Duskbloods directly refers to the Bloodsworn themselves. As mentioned earlier, the Bloodsworn are summoned to the Twilight of Humanity in a battle for First Blood. The Duskbloods is a collective term for these characters controlled by the player. And the Bloodsworn are competing for something known as First Blood. First Blood flows in an event. Okay, so it's something about end of time. There's this thing, the First Blood, and that could have to do with time. That could there could be a lot of stuff with it. So there's this important thing, the First Blood. And I'm already getting a little sucked into the narrative stuff. I hope that the narrative in this game is portrayed, and just with the amount he's talking about the setting and flavor, I'm hoping that that comes to fruition. Okay, last question, this first part. It sounds like blood plays a pretty big role in the game. Yes, in the context of the game, blood is used more conceptually, as opposed to literal meanings like physical depictions of injury. Blood symbolizes one of the game's key themes, the history it holds, the power it passes on, the fates it weaves, and the marker of those who have surpassed the limitations of their own humanity. That's some real Bloodborne-ass shit right there. I mean, because Blood Echoes is all about the history it holds, the power it passes on, and so, they're playing with themes. From Software has their pet themes, and they're, that's why we're getting these Bloodborne vibes, and they're using this, but it sounds like it's not just that, so that's interested to see more of that for sure. Let's get on to part 2. What are some characteristics of the Bloodsworn? There are several reasons we put the player's focus on the Bloodsworn, with one of those being character actions. The Bloodsworn possesses superhuman abilities thanks to special blood. Their actions are more dramatic than anything seen in our previous titles. Interesting. I wonder if that applies to Night Rain too, where there's some pretty dramatic actions as well. Even basic character actions in this game, such as sprinting, super jump, and double jump, are designed to be dynamic and stress-free, and are complemented by each character's own unique weapons and abilities, allowing for a wide range of creativity. Also, while this isn't directly related to the Bloodsworn themselves, the setting allows for the depiction of firearms and such, and every character is equipped with some means of attacking from a distance. Okay, so we got some gunplay here. I feel this is one of the game's unique aspects when compared with our previous titles. I hope these new action elements are one area that players will enjoy. So unlike Bloodborne, which was bringing in guns as a means for parrying and visceral attacks, this is explicitly like guns and other stuff, like probably spells and the such, will be a means of attacking from a distance, so everybody will have ranged options and presumably melee options as well, although I'm sure there will be different focuses for different characters, which seem to be talked about here. Earlier you referred to protagonists or characters as plural. Does this mean the player will be able to choose from multiple different characters? Yes, there's over a dozen characters for the player to choose from, each with their own identity and appearance. I think there are a lot of unique elements to the character designs and the weapons they use, so hopefully players can find one or two favorites among them. Also, each character can be customized to a certain extent, allowing players the fun of building a character that feels like their own. So, it was a bit of a debate. People, and myself included, felt like you were seeing these sort of characters, and that seems to be true. So, not to draw too many comparisons between Night Rain and the Bloodsworn, but it seems to be, in both cases, they are also pursuing these more character-focused action multiplayer games. Different ways these are playing out, obviously, from what we're reading, but it's interesting that, with their RPGs, it's very broad, and in these two titles, they're focusing on characters who have a certain look and style, and that seems to be a way for them to pursue more unique abilities and, different functionalities, because they can sort of balance it within the characters themselves, and there will be some customization, so that's cool. And we got another shot of the boob frog, which is looking real big, real massive, real nasty girl. Can you provide some detail on the general gameplay loop? Alright, this is the good stuff. The game has a so-called hub area where players can choose their character, customize them, and enter online multiplayer. Online matches support up to 8 players. Upon concluding an online match, players then return to the hub, at which point they receive some sort of reward, whether they win or lose. Using these rewards, players can further customize their character, and so the cycle continues. So, not to beat a dead horse, but this is like Night Rain 2, which makes sense for a multiplayer game to have a hub, and then you go do things. They both seem to have this sort of meta progression, where they haven't gotten into the details here, but there's things you get for winning or losing, both in Night Rain and, sounds like, here in the Duskbloods. And that cycle continues as you can now sort of bring in a character with new stuff, it sounds like. Online matches are generally last player standing, however there are certain cases where victory conditions differ. For example, players may be tasked with teaming up to take down a powerful boss or enemy, or find themselves in other special circumstances. Okay, so there will be, I wonder if that's something players are choosing before going into a match, or they're, getting matched up and they are then finding out what the condition is for that particular match. Let's see, and I'm also curious how they are doing the matchmaking, because with Night Rain it feels like they're using this holdover Elden Ring thing, so I kind of hope to get into that here and talk about how they're doing matchmaking, if you can just get in with some friends, or how that works. So victory conditions are influenced not by just PvP results, but PvE results as well. That's right, some victory conditions center around defeating a boss, and that's cool. So players maybe working together? It's not clear there, but I can't think of many examples with that rule set. It sounds very interesting. I'm happy to hear you say that. Regardless of whether it's PvE or PvE, the idea is to provide players with an experience that allows them to learn and hone their skills as they play. We've therefore designed the PvE boss encounters to present a tough challenge and sense of accomplishment upon defeating them, so players can enjoy improving their own skills over time as they battle. Yes, although there are a variety of elements in place that keep the game from becoming too stoic. For example, how players conduct themselves during a match is just as important as direct combat. The Duskbloods implements victory points, which are responsible for ultimately deciding the outcome of a match. To obtain victory points, direct combat is of course important, but it's not the only way. Some players may prefer to earn points by avoiding direct combat and instead engaging in more opportunistic behavior. How you earn points is entirely up to you. Additionally, each character can summon an entity to assist in combat, giving players a high degree of freedom when it comes to how they fight and win. So it kind of looks like this guy we saw might be one of those summons or a character. It's not entirely clear here, but it's a cool design. I like the big rifle too. Another important aspect is match variables such as the event system. This system has the potential to alter the course of the match such as special enemy spawns and additional objectives with accompanying bonus rewards. In the trailer, you've noticed a giant stone face looming in the sky. This is one example of the events that can occur in a match. In this case, the appearance of the stone face affects the environment and changes match rewards, which can have an immediate impact upon player motivations and objectives. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So there's events that pop up the stone face, changing the sky. I wonder if that's what causes like those spiky elements to appear in the sky, but yeah, that sounds pretty cool. It'll change sort of the objectives or motivations through the rewards of the match. These events don't happen all the time, and I hope discovering them gives players some incentive to keep coming back. Okay. It sounds like even those who tend to shy away from PvP can still enjoy themselves. That was the intention. I personally am not much of a PvP person, and I wanted to make something that's satisfying even for players like me. So Miyazaki is just like me, for real. While the goal of a match is to obtain first blood, there are personal objectives that provide separate rewards to the player as well, so I hope these add to the fun of each engagement. So I mean, while he might not be much of a PvP person, I'm not really either. It's like, if you're playing this, you're doing PvP. It sounds like an integral part of the game, sort of regardless. Let's go into part 3. Playing roles and altering fates. What other ways might players enjoy the game outside of combat? One thing I love doing in any game I direct is leaving fragments of lore and world-building details, alright, allowing the player to have fun of using their imagination to make connections. The Duskbloods is no exception to this. It was written directly for me. That's a great thing to hear, that's something they're focusing on. However, we've gone about it a little differently from previous titles. The fragments this time are found in the previously mentioned character customization items, their blood history and fate. Customizing a character will reveal a piece of information regarding the world and its unfolding story. Sounds cool. You customize their blood history and fate? Yes, analyzing and altering a character's blood history and fate allows players to customize all sorts of things from their abilities, appearance, and inner characteristics to the role they play in the world and relationships with other characters. Focusing these elements on the concept of blood or blood history and fate allowed for a deeper exploration of customization and is another reason we placed the Bloodsworn as the protagonists. So you're changing their blood history, and that teaches you more about the world, sort of like, it seems like they're getting this blood, and it's changing their understanding of the world or something, which, okay, sounds cool. Do you mind sharing any other points you personally find interesting? One area I haven't talked about yet is roles. In online play, roles give players special responsibilities and objectives that often lead to unique interactions and relationships between players based on their corresponding roles. Okay, that's probably not much info to go on, so allow me to provide a few examples, but please note we're still finalizing some of the naming and details. For example, if a player possesses the Destined Rivals role, another player is designated as their rival, and they are tasked with finding and defeating that player. Doing so counts as achieving a personal goal separate from the overall victory conditions. Another example is Destined Companion, where one player is required to seek out another designated as their companion, which results in a reward if they form a bond with one another. Roles can be assigned to any character via blood customization, allowing players to enjoy role-playing in a literal sense and hopefully adding to the drama of these engagements. In my trying to understand if there's like some friendly stuff, does this Destined Companion mean that they will be friendly toward one another, or is that something the players sort of choose? And what does it mean if they form a bond with one another? I'm curious to know what that means in like a gameplay sense, but it sounds interesting to get these sort of personal objectives. That sort of reminds me of semi-cooperative board games where you have a thing that you're trying to achieve together, which isn't the case here, but then each player in those games also has their sort of own personal thing, and that sort of helps mitigate, in that sense, players from just like trying to min-max their own thing because they don't know what other players are trying to do. And this sounds like more of a PvP version of that role, which is interesting. So we see two what looks like characters here fighting, so maybe they are friendly and fighting together. Maybe that's a summon. Kind of like how players can pick their roles in a tabletop RPG. Exactly, while not entirely intentional, it may reflect my own interests a bit. It might seem a little unorthodox at first, but I hope players will give it a try. Okay. That reminds me, I was curious about the winged rat character seen in the trailer. Can you provide some details as to what role this character serves? It's funny because it's a game about vampires, and instead of being like a bat, it's a winged rat, which is how someone who may have never seen a bat might describe it. But then, it doesn't have the bat wings, so it's just kind of a funny dodge there. That character shares a similar role with the Firekeepers from the Dark Souls series. Okay, it's our new maiden here. They remain in the hub area, providing the player with advice and guidance. I suppose you could say we tried doing something a little Nintendo-esque in the spirit of the partnership. Which, yeah, that's one of the designs that when I saw it, I was like, this is not necessarily a FromSoft design. So it's interesting that, maybe they're intentionally making it look just a bit different. A little more, your furry buddy helping you out. What do you mean by that? We tried something cute for a change. Although I will say this character is actually an elderly gentleman. Okay, so perhaps not a maiden, but filling the Firekeeper role. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish? In addition to creating a PvPvE title, we tried our hand at introducing a lot of new and interesting ideas with the Duskbloods. From superhuman player actions, a free-form combat approach, and gameplay that's dynamic and dramatic to the romanticized aesthetic of the Bloodsworn, deep character customization, and fragmented storytelling. Hell yeah. I think there's a lot to appreciate and enjoy in this title, and I sincerely hope players look forward to it. God damn it, Miyazaki, your silver tongue sways me a bit once again. Although, where is it? Oh, let's see. A lot of new interesting ideas. The fragmented storytelling is cool. It does... Oh yeah, what I wanted to mention was this does seem to be at the core, and not to bring up Night Rain again, but these both seem like smaller scope projects ultimately compared to like an Elden Ring. And the silver lining with all of this stuff for me is that regardless of if I like this game, which is still, they can try to make it not PvP, but that seems to be what it is at its core. And I don't know how much I will jive with that personally, but I do like that they're bringing the fragmented storytelling. And I really like that this is a chance to do new and interesting ideas, a way to experiment, because they're getting out of their comfort zone in a more, economically developer responsible way where they're not doing a huge project. Like Elden Ring was really the culmination of a decade of From Software doing their thing, and then they added this open world component bringing it together. That meant that the core mechanics were pretty similar to what we'd seen, a bit tried and true, because you can't do everything new at once. You have to bring something back that is understood, especially when you're adding scope and scale. So by reducing the scope and scale of these projects, they can mess around with stuff more on a more foundational level because they have these things. And I think that they probably, I don't think this necessarily was the intention, but with Night Rain and the Duskbloods, they probably got a lot of tools from Elden Ring that helped them create maps and worlds, because they've talked about how much they changed their kit and their workflow and approach to creating environments during Elden Ring, and I think that allows them, there's a lot of new assets here, but I think it probably did help them with Elden Ring to then create these titles and sort of iterate on some of those tools and just be something they can bring forward into future titles, more future more future single player titles. And, I'm sort of playing the long game here because I think these games will be fun. I don't think they'll be all-timers like Dark Souls or Elden Ring for me, but these things may bring in better multiplayer components into their single-player games in the future because they have a framework for it. And we might get more evolution in their combat. They're doing these very character-focused things, so what can they do to bring that then into their single-player games and start to bring in abilities and stuff like that? Like, it would be cool to see them shake things up on that level, and I'm here for them to try it, and I'm hoping that these games sort of jive with me and work well, even if it's just for like 20 to 40 hours, and then I'm like, okay, I've had enough, done playing with other people, time to go play Dark Souls again. But I still, it's a lot to get two of these at once, but that interview was encouraging for me at least, because it's just interesting to hear what they're working with as someone who respects this developer so much. And, they could have just really sat on their laurels with Elden Ring and just remained cautious, but they're taking this opportunity and this big success to do some weird things. And, we'll see. It's not, I would rather, like I said in my previous video, if this is what From Software wants to pursue for their passion, then go for it. If it's from any sort of exterior pressures to do certain things, I wouldn't like that, but I just don't think that's the case here. And until I see otherwise, I have faith in From Software, cooking and doing their thing. And this is Miyazaki himself on this. So, I have some faith that there will be some cool stuff. We already saw cool enemy designs, cool environments. So, I'm down for that. We'll see how long that keeps my interest, but I'm interested in this. These interviews, I guess this interview in 3 parts, did answer some questions. It didn't totally answer how some of the matchmaking works. Or, the one thing I was wondering is this didn't clarify for me if it's Nintendo, their press release. Actually, let me bring that up. All right, so here is the press release from Software's website, and they do say the Duskbloods published by Nintendo / From Software. And I don't know, I haven't seen this as a shorthand for published by Nintendo, developed by From Software. So I'm reading it right now as it's being published by Nintendo and From Software. Maybe it's a thing where they're doing it in Japan, but I'm curious because this affects how soon the Duskbloods may come to other consoles, in my opinion. If it's a timed exclusive or if it's just going to sit on the Switch 2. This hasn't fully answered the question, but it has confirmed at least that, Nintendo is publishing it, but maybe also From Software. It might be a bit of a joint thing there. And I'm wondering if this is From Software's first real step toward self-publishing, which is something they've been talking about doing more. So, I don't know. But this interview was helpful. It answered a lot of stuff. And I'm looking forward to getting more information in 2026 for this game, so we have some time. If you got something, if you enjoyed this format, please let me know in the comments. I decided just to sort of, I don't know, I'm much more verbose when I'm not scripted. I'm verbose when I am scripted too. But I just thought this was something I was so curious to get the information in. I didn't feel like collating it all together. I wanted to get my experience and my takes as they are coming forth and just learn more about this game. And I'm glad I did because, I don't know, it's interesting. I'm still, who knows how it'll, land for me ultimately, but it sounds cool, and hopefully they will do a network test although it's on Switch. I don't know. We will see, but I'm curious to get some hands-on impressions and preferably my own hands on the Duskbloods. So please subscribe to the Lore Hunter if you want some more information about this. I'm going to continue to follow From Software's games here. We got Night Rain, we got the Duskbloods. Please subscribe for some more. Leave comments with your thoughts about all this. People are going to have thoughts. I've seen a lot of good discussion happening. I think there's stuff to chew on. So thanks for watching.